McCown and Shannon back with you, and we are joined by Ray Ferraro, who's off to the airport, driving in his car as we speak. It's that time of year, week and a bit till the end of the regular season. There are two factors that I think of at this time of year. I think of teams that made significant changes and trying to get your lineup set, make sure everybody is on the same page. And late in the season, you want your team to play well, don't you? Don't you want to be playing well when you get to the postseason, Ray?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, there's one other factor I'll throw in really quickly, and that's health.
Sure.
You got to be lucky sometimes to get to the playoffs and have your roster mostly intact or as much intact as you can. The best team in the league by a mile this year is Boston. And, they've got the luxury of resting a couple of guys, Bergeron and Krejci in particular. Bergeron didn't play Saturday, Saturday and Sunday. Krejci didn't play Sunday. McAvoy didn't play Sunday, but they don't have Taylor Hall or Nick Foligno or Derek Forbort either. And, so they're kind of hoping everybody's ready. And that's one part of it. The second part is the playing well. I find it pretty rare that teams are good enough to be able to just hit the ground and change the direction that they've been playing. Mm-hmm. It's really hard when the game, it gets, I don't know, pick a percentage, 10% more intense, 10% more meaningful, each puck battle and each rebound and each save in the playoffs. If you're not playing well at the previous level, how are you going to get to the next one? And sometimes the series is gone before you even get started. The third one is all the changes. Ideally, there's two ways to look at it. Ideally, you wouldn't want to change half your team before the playoffs, like at the deadline. The other point is maybe that's been your plan all along, that you're dragging up cap space and you're saving nickels and dimes and quarters, and you get to the deadline and the places you want to really target shop, you can go ahead and do. Nobody's got the perfect formula, or everybody would be doing the same thing. It's the best teams are generally the best teams in the playoffs. Best teams from the regular season are the best teams in the playoffs, but there's a lot of factors that help that be the case.
Yeah. Ray, firsthand, Ray, you saw the Pittsburgh Penguins on Saturday. What is right and wrong with them right now? Because I'm one of those guys that when I see Letang play and Malkin play and Crosby play and Gensel play, saying, why are they struggling to be in the playoffs?
Well, I think you hit on it right there, actually, is you stopped at 4 guys.
Yeah.
And the bottom end of their roster gives them almost nothing. Like they really, really struggle to keep pace. They don't get much production from the bottom of their lineup. And so if those 4 guys don't have it on a particular day, they're going to struggle. Their goaltending has been hit and miss all year. In particular, early in the year, Casey DeSmith couldn't stop anything. Then he's been on a pretty good run since, I'd say, about the middle of February. He's been really good. Tristan Jarry had a good start, and then since January, he's lost his way, and he's just not been really as good as they need him to be. So a lack of depth, that really hurts them. It really, really hurts them. They didn't really improve at the deadline. Mikael Granlund has given them, just about nothing. He was kind of one of their big acquisitions. They're banged up on the blue line, to our previous point. No Pettersson till the last game of the year at the earliest. Petrie just came back. They don't have Kulikov. They're no Jan Ruta either. So that's 4 of their 6 guys. I'm with you though, John. I keep expecting them to put together a run and to, just solidify their spot. It looks like it's going to go down to the last minute.
Yeah. I guess I have so much faith in Sidney Crosby. I'm one of those guys. I have blind faith in the man, and you've seen it firsthand. And he wills his way to victory.
mean, he's 30. I think he's 34 right now. So you're obviously not going to be the player you were 5 years ago, and he's not. But there is something about him that the way he plays, the intensity that he plays with, the skill that he clearly we all overlook still. I mean, it could be possible he's really still underappreciated, even for, the brilliance that he's had throughout his career. I always expect around the next corner, here comes Crosby with a 10-game point streak. Here comes Crosby and Gensel play so well together. I expect them all the time to be in the middle of it. And I'm more surprised when they're not, because I'm with you. I just think he's still so good. So good. The guy that goes in and out for me is Malkin. Saturday, he was, they're playing Boston. They're in a game they need to win, and they're out of it. They're really not playing very well. Malkin's got no factor in the game. And he does that once in a while. They need him to be that factor because they don't have the depth to sustain it.
What kind of a team would this be if it made it to the playoffs? Would it be a team you'd be worried about because of the big four? Or is it a team that you think would just have overachieved and probably can't do it in the playoffs?
I think they would be not an easy out, but I mean, they would play Boston. They're not beating Boston.
Right. Yeah.
So that they have a feel to me a lot like the 2015-ish Detroit Red Wings, who had made the playoffs 25 years in a row.
Right.
You get to the point where Zetterberg and Datsuk and Lidstrom are, incredible legacy players, but clearly not what they were. I mean, how could they be with all the extra games they played, all the mileage on their bodies? They just, and then it just, that was it. The Wings missed the playoffs, and they haven't made it since. And so that's kind of a little bit of what I feel with Pittsburgh, because so much is tied up. And I don't mean financially. I mean, so much success is tied up in the four guys you mentioned, John, earlier: Gensel, Letang, Crosby, Malkin. And how are you going to replace those guys?
Well, in fact, I mean, Ron Hextall went out and signed them to extensions, right? At least a couple of them. I mean,
right. So, but again, and John, you guys have been around long enough to know this. Is that all Hextall? Is that Hextall plus a little gentle nudge, push, shove from management or from ownership?
Right.
Their legacy in Pittsburgh is, I mean, the fortunate draft history of Lemieux to Crosby to Malkin to Fleury to all those pieces all came together. Like, could you imagine? And I guess it happens. And probably at some point, the cold-bloodedness of running a management team and an ownership group of pro sports is, you can't imagine Willie Mays in a Mets uniform. Like, maybe that's where they needed to go last year. They had the opportunity for a bunch of cap space to be available, but are you really not going to sign Chris Letang? Are you really, they went down to the wire with Malkin. It seemed like Malkin was out the door, and then he was back in. And there's a lot of pressures around the general manager's chair, I'm sure, that we never really get to understand.
Yeah.
The other team that it's time to redo this Penguin team.
Okay, in theory, sure. Yeah, let's redo it. Though, how do you do that?
Well, I understand. Probably deal at least one of those guys.
Yeah, but so we've spent the better part of 2 years talking about cap space or lack thereof.
Right.
So, somebody's got to have the cap space to acquire one of those players, because if you're redoing it, are you redoing it on the fly, or are you trying to rebuild? Because if you're trying to rebuild and you've got three of those guys, they're never going to be bad enough to rebuild. You've either got to go right to the bottom of the bin, and which owners or how many owners are saying, you know what, I hope we win 21 games next year. and 30 the year after, and you can roll a bowling ball around the stands and not hit anybody. Like this rebuild thing, it sounds great, but it honestly, it's like life. Lots of things sound great, and then in reality, they're not so great. In theory, they're awesome. And the rebuild is, there is no way around it. From scratch to a playoff team is plus 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on the bottom, if you're the team that's drafting Connor Bedard this year, are we really thinking that Connor's going to turn that franchise around by March of next year? I mean, they're in last place for a reason.
Yeah, of course.
They're good.